Hi, I'm Dr. Vincent Grasso, the social media director for Artificial Intelligence Surgery, a very interesting recent publication. And I'm happy to have as a guest on our podcast, the Artificial Intelligence and Cybersurgery podcast, Dr. Andrew Gumbs, who's the editor-in-chief of the journal. And so it's a pleasure having you on. We'll be doing these things together, but I have an opportunity actually to introduce you to the audience in a way that would have a broader appeal than just to our surgical colleagues. So thanks for taking the time out. We know each other directly and indirectly for a while. I trained, as you know, with your brother-in-law in general surgery when I was at Sinai in New York, and learned about you later on. And interestingly, we crossed paths somewhat when I was doing my surgical fellowship in minimally invasive surgery, advanced minimally invasive surgery at Yale in the late 90s when you were still a student. And just for our audience sake, you have an interesting background. You're very modest. You're one of the few people around that are actually a triple Yale guy. And for the audience, Dr. Gumbs did his undergraduate at Yale, his medical school at Yale, and he did general surgery at Yale, which is an interesting selection for you. I mean, you chose those three opportunities. You had many others to pick from. So let's just talk about some background stuff. What got you into surgery? You like that path before our discussion on AI and surgery. So if you can help the audience understand your career path at that point.
Yeah, my father is from the Caribbean. He's from a little island called Anguilla. It's actually still part of Britain. Yeah. He went to college when he was 18. He went to college at NYU. He actually got into Columbia and NYU, but NYU was easier on the train, and he didn't know any better, so he went to NYU. Nothing against NYU, but it's just it always amazes me how my poor dad as an immigrant with no guidance, he made choices like that, and based on the metro stop, because he was living in the South Bronx at the time. After he graduated at NYU, it wasn't the easiest for Black men to go to medical school. Of course, there were some getting into medical school, but not as much as you would like. And back then in the 60s, University of Bologna was really actually one of the top medical schools, and he had to learn Italian. He took a 3-month course in Perugia, Italy, and then he started medical school at essentially the oldest university in the world in Bologna. Eventually he met my mother, and when he finished medical school, they moved back to New York, and my sister was born, then I was born, and my father always loved surgery. When he was a child, actually, he would tell me these stories how he would capture the little lizards they have down in the Caribbean.
Sure.
Somehow he'd capture them. I'm not even sure if I should be recording this, but it's a fascinating story. He would figure out a way to have them fall asleep. I don't know if he used gasoline or what he did. He would have them fall asleep. He would actually cut open a little lizard. He would remove an organ. He would sew them back up, reanimate them, and watch them run away, which blows my mind. I mean, this is before television. This is before the internet. And I don't know where he got this. I mean, I'm at some point, you wonder about divine intervention, and this is one of those things where you're like, Anyway, my father always loved surgery, and really I got my passion through him. When I was a child, actually, the first year of my life was spent in South Korea. My dad worked at the last MASH unit in Seoul, Korea. During Vietnam, my dad, to become a citizen, they told him, look, this would probably look good if you would sign up to the military during Vietnam. Thankfully, they sent my father and therefore my family to South Korea. And, always been around surgery, and it's really, I owe a lot of it to my father, who's an amazing surgeon. He worked in the South Bronx essentially his entire career. He actually had his own TV show where he would talk about medical issues. I remember there's even pictures of him on buses in you know, in New York City. He was quite well known in the Bronx for this. People would recognize him in the streets, which is you know, I really have to get access to some of those episodes.
You know, it's so interesting to hear. I mean, your dad kind of is a pioneer, right? He kind of he comes to New York. He goes to an Ivy League program. You know, they weren't very supportive of people from his community, right? We know that, and you know, he wound up going and learn Italian. I mean, it's just an amazing story. My family, I have family. I spent time in Bologna too, studying, and my uncle he did medical school there. I have his textbooks. I have his surgical anatomy textbooks, and what a fantastic school. But you know, your dad is you know, is a hero. And so that motivated you, but you know, you still had to do the work, right? You still have to study and do what you have to do to get through the programs. And you selected Yale. You know, what was your, you know, you come out of a good high school, you're obviously a bright guy, and you chose Yale. What was that all about?
I was born in the Bronx, you know, very close to Yankee Stadium. So
okay.
Harvard was off the list, right? Boston. so back when I was applying to college, Yale was ranked #1.
Sure.
You know, it was near home, and I love the campus. I loved Yale. Yale was it was a great place. It still is a great place, and a great place to study. You know, that.
No, yeah. I mean, I like being in New Haven too. The you know, the pizza is great, and it's close to New York, right? We just take the train back and forth. But then then you selected medical school, so you also stayed there for medical school. What was the rationale behind that?
Well, you know, medical school there was a great place, and they were, you know, people who go to Yale are a little bit, they beat to a different drum, if you will. I had a lot of mentors who were interested in work in the developing world, and actually, the reason I wanted to become a surgeon was so I could work with Doctors Without Borders, which I you know, actually ended up doing. And a lot of people really nurtured my wish and my desire for that. At the same time, as a medical student, I did a lot of research on Chagas disease, believe it or not. I actually went down to Brazil, worked at the Institute Fiocruz. You know, Yale, I felt really pushed helping the developing world more than a lot of other medical schools. So that was really my impetus to remain. And then staying for residency, I mean, the minimally invasive world was, you know, was brand new, and it was, you know, Yale was the place to be back then. You know, it was one of the places to be. Obviously, there are other places like Sinai, as you know, Michel Gagne, who's someone I trained with later. You know, Yale was a fascinating place. Had really intelligent people, and you know, I was really excited to learn about minimally invasive surgery. And I actually, after Yale, I did a minimally invasive surgery fellowship with Michel Gagne when he was at Cornell.
Wow,
it was a dual fellowship. It was 6 months at Columbia with Dennis Fowler and Mark Bessler. Dennis Fowler, who did the first laparoscopic colectomy, and Mark Bessler, you know, one of the great bariatric surgeons. He's still there. And then Michel Gagne at Cornell, and Alphonse Pomp, of course, and Gregory Dakin at Cornell. I mean, it was really exciting time. And you know, what I really wanted to do was minimally invasive Whipple procedures. I remember.
Oh, okay.
I remember some of my some of the surgeons at Yale didn't think that was a great idea. I won't mention any names. They're pretty famous people right now. But there was no place to do laparoscopic Whipples. So the only person who had really published about them at the time was Michel Gagne, even though he stopped doing them. He was a bariatric surgeon then. So I went to work with him anyway because I wanted to learn. You know, I figured at least learn from someone who had done them. And luckily for me, he knew 2 options to do. You know, so I did another fellowship. I did he told me I could either go to India with Pala Nevelu, who was in India, or with a guy called Brice Gaillet. who's really a phenomenal minimally invasive surgery. I mean, this guy does everything. He has a PhD in anatomy. He actually he got that PhD in Japan with Makuchi. He actually trained with Makuchi. So Brice Gaillet is actually the one who identified Makuchi's ligament. You know, so I always refer to it as Gaillet's ligament, but he was under Makuchi at the time, so it became known as Makuchi's ligament in Asia. But in France, you know, it's still Gaillet's ligament. You know, the 3 retrocaval ligaments, the 1, 2, or 3, everyone's a little bit different. Retrocaval ligament that suspends the liver. I should mention that during the middle of my residency, I did a 2-year fellowship of pancreatic surgery with a guy called Claudio Bassi. University of Verona was really one of the top centers in the world for pancreatic surgery. And so that's why I went there. Of course, they didn't do laparoscopic Whipples, you know, but so I've always had a strong interest in pancreatic surgery because my grandmother succumbed to pancreatic cancer, you know, when I was a teenager, and it really affected my mother, and it really left an impression on me. So that's kind of where my interest in pancreatic surgery comes from, and you know, working with Brice Gaillet, who is very interesting fellow, because he you know, he works at a famous hospital where they did the first published case of a laparoscopic cholecystectomy. He actually operated on Marcello Mostriani for pancreatic cancer. And his daughter is a very famous actress, actually. She is currently dating the former president, François Hollande. So he's a very dynamic fellow, very intelligent fellow. And he's actually the editor emeritus of our journal. He taught me a lot, specifically, aside from the anatomy, which I could go on for ages talking about him. I mean, this man's command of anatomy is mind-blowing. But he was always not a fan of the complete surgical system by Da Vinci. He was one of the first to use it. And actually, he has a new company where he's developing a new robot where the surgeon maintains contact with the patient, so that, you know, you have robotic arms that can hold, give you benefits of robotics, but the surgeon is still at the patient's bedside and can actually maintain haptics. So, you know, he's a very intelligent man with anatomy and with technology, and he really helped nurture my my interest in technology.
You know, you have a wonderful history of working with the giants. I mean, just, you know, you were at the right time at Yale, right? So I guess your surgical residency was early 2000s, right?
So I started in 98.
98, right?
I did 2 years, and then I did 2 years in Verona, which really Verona's become, like you said, I mean, you know, maybe the busiest center for pancreatic surgery in the world right now. And then I finished I came back in 2002 to 2005, and I finished. Then I did the fellowship at Cornell Columbia 2005, 6, and then I went to France. And actually, I went to work at Columbia for a little bit at the Pancreatic Center. Then I went to Fox Chase Cancer Center in Philadelphia. And then I wanted to get back to my wife, who was living in New York, and I went to a big private practice center that was actually affiliated with MD Anderson. And I found out that working as a surgeon without academic stimulation was not for me. I will leave it at that. Sure. I will leave it at that. So I actually moved back to France about 3 years ago, about 3.5 years ago, actually. And I now work at a hospital system, a public hospital system. We're 4 hospitals. It's called a Groupe Hospitalier. We're 4 hospitals, and I'm the head of surgical oncology of these 4 hospitals. And it's been fascinating. You know, I started writing. Incredible. I started becoming passionate again about my job. I started loving my job again. You know, before I had wanted to just stop being a surgeon altogether. I mean, when I was in private practice, all we did was every meeting was talking about how we can make more money. It was mind-boggling. It was 8 years of being like a businessman, and that's not why I became a doctor.
Sure.
To be in a public health system now, writing again, I started publishing, and I started getting contacted from journals. They're asking me to be a special editor, to write an editorial here, what have you. And then I was actually contacted by OAE Publishing to become the editor-in-chief of Artificial Intelligence and Surgery. And you know, it's been amazing. I started a master's in artificial intelligence, and I'm completing it shortly. And then, you know, you who I wish I had gotten to know better, you know, years ago. It's funny how we've come full circle, and here we are, you know. And
well, I mean, there's too much to go over, obviously, right? So I think our audience really would like to know a lot about your past and where you see yourself going. I think safe to say your patients are the big beneficiaries of having this depth and breadth of education, right? So and as we know as surgeons, you know, you're a product of where you trained and who trained you, and you bring that to each patient that you see. So your patients benefit from, you know, the various locations that you went and trained in Italy and France and in the United States. So I'm sure they're very happy about that. I think we need to have another session where we move forward from the educational piece. You know, you are the editor of this exciting journal. We need to talk about the cool AI stuff we're doing in robotics and conversational AI and machine learning, robotic process automation. This whole new ecosystem is so exciting, and our patients are going to be the big beneficiaries of this, right? This efficiency. So we need to schedule some more time.
I mean, absolutely, because, you know, minimally invasive surgery has been phenomenal. I mean, it had the genius of putting a computer, a screen in between the surgeon and the patient, and that has opened up a whole host of possibilities. Robotic surgery, as we know today, in my opinion, is just another form of minimally invasive surgery. It's really not that exciting to me, because I still like to be in contact with my patient. I still like haptics.
Sure.
I think it's very important. But and I was not excited by the complete surgical system. You know, I used handheld robotics before, smaller robots.
Right. Right.
We talk about that another time. But robotics, as we know it, did not excite me. But then at the same time, as we started, you know, the trough of disillusionment, you know, at the same time, artificial intelligence came on, machine learning, deep learning, computer vision. I mean, it's fascinating, because it can eliminate the rote, the aspects of medicine that are killing doctors, that are giving us burnout, and the fact that it can liberate us to have more time with our patients to do more complex things in the operating room. I mean, the opportunities or possibilities are endless and very exciting.
Well, just in closure for the next session, just for our listeners, one thing that attracted me to be willing to work with Dr. Gumbs on his journal and the cool things is that he does recognize the importance of the whole surgical episode, right? The ecosystem of surgery. What happens before the operating room? What happens in the operating room? What happens after the operating room? That's the patient goes through that journey. So he's very excited about making sure that we can bring all this new technology to those three phases and have our patients experience the best outcome they can, right? And that's at the end of the day, that's the most important. So I do applaud you on your willingness to live out of the OR as well, and you understand how important that is as a surgeon. So we need to schedule some more time, and just also, you're a foodie from what I understand. And you probably know the best restaurants.
The culinary capital of Italy, and Italy has the best food in the world. So
we'll have to talk about our mutual cooking, fascinations. And you've got the benefit now of being in Paris besides. So I'm sure everyone's going to want to hear about some of that stuff.
Great.
Well, thanks everyone for your participation and viewing, and thank you, Dr. Gumbs. And we'll close off. I'm Dr. Vincent Grasso, the social media director for AI and surgery, and our
Thank you so
editor,
much.
Dr. Gumbs, and we'll see everyone soon. Take care. Be well.